So now that we know a little bit of HTML, we're going to move on to include CSS. And CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. So imagine you're working on a web page and you want to define some visual characteristic of the material found there. So say you want to make your title text blue, for example. Now let's say your web page gets really complicated and you've got 10 or 100 or 1,000 pages on your website. Imagine every time you want to make a change, having to go back through and change each of those colors individually. That would take forever, right? So what cascading style sheets let you do is set up one external sheet that has the rules for how things look and behave. So for example, I could say every time there's an H1 tag, it should be 20 pixels tall, it should be bold, it should be blue, etc. And then every single HTML page that invokes an H1 tag will look at the cascading style sheet for instructions on how to display that H1 tag. So we're going to go ahead and set that up now. Okay, now every single week in this class, we want to have a new repository so we have a different link to send people to. So in GitHub Desktop, I'll go to File and New Repository. And let's call this one Site 2 or Page 2 or whatever you've been using. And here it's going into my GitHub folder. We're not going to initialize with a README. We'll ignore all the rest of this stuff and we'll say create repository. Okay, then I need to publish that repository on GitHub, right? So we want to share this up online. We're going to let that code be public and we'll publish it. So that'll show up in our GitHub account. Now don't forget that at the end of this process, you'll need to go online into settings and switch that branch to main, I believe it was. And we covered that in an earlier video. Okay, now right now there's nothing inside my repository. So let's open the repository in an external editor, which is Shift-Command-A on the Mac. And we bring this up in Atom. And we can see our repo right there, and there's nothing in there except for, sort of secret files that GitHub needs to track our changes. So I'll close all this stuff down, right-click over here in this left column and say New File. And the new file we always want, the first file is index.html because, again, that's where web browsers look by default. We're also going to make a file called mystyle.css. So at the moment, both of these files are blank, right? Now let's go take a look online at W3 Schools at how to add CSS. So on this page right here, which is, we're skipping through a little bit of the intro because we've sort of already covered that, we can see that there's 3 ways to use cascading style sheets: external, internal, and inline CSS. So we're interested in this first one, external CSS. It's possible to add styles in the HTML page, but then they don't really do you any good because when you want to change them, you have to go through and change every page individually. So external CSS is the way to go. I'll just copy this full block of text right here, head back to Atom, and we're pasting that in the index, not the CSS page. Okay, so this should all look familiar: doc type, HTML, head, body, etc. But now we have this new tag right here, this new element we're unfamiliar with called link. And link has a rel, so that's effectively the type of file it is. It's a style sheet. And an href should be familiar because we've seen that in the a tag, right? So it's linking out to mystyle.css. And this is only going to work right now because index and mystyle.css are sitting right there in the same folder. Later, once we get more complicated, we'll have to start navigating between folders. Okay, we have h1 and p tags and so forth, so I can save this material. Now let's head back over here and take a look at what needs to go inside mystyle.css. So that has references to the body and the h1 tag. Let's take a look at these in more detail. So CSS has a little bit of a different syntax, which you can kind of think of as the spelling and grammar that makes computer code operate. You can see here that we're identifying a particular area of our material, so the body. That means that every single thing that falls in between these two body tags will be subject to the rules that are found between what are known as these curly braces, these little mustaches. Okay, so within the body, we tab over, and then we say background-color is light blue. But take a look at that syntax. Background-color, colon, and then a space, light blue, and then a semicolon. So it's really important you get these exactly right. If you ever accidentally miss even just a semicolon or something like that, it'll throw all of this code off. So the body has this rule. And then H1 we're saying is a little bit of a different color, and then margin left has to do with positioning. We'll talk more about that as we go on. Right now we'll focus on color. So note that background color is invoked, and then just color is invoked. So let's see how those operate. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to my index page. Again, this will be within the GitHub folder, and I called mine Site 2. Okay, so index and my style. So I'll open up index in Firefox. And you can see that the CSS is taken over, right? So I didn't say anything about color in my index page. The background is light blue, the heading is darker blue, and then the paragraph is largely unchanged. So now you can see where this starts to become more powerful, because I can come in here and I could say, for example, that color equals red and save it. Head back over to Firefox and reload it, and now our color has changed. But this is interesting to note. You see how it's the text color that's changed? And yet in CSS, color by itself is the thing that controls text color. So if you want to control the background color, you call that out specifically. But if you want to control the color of the text, you don't say text color, you just say color. So some of these are a little confusingly titled like that. You just have to start to memorize them. And you don't just have to use words for the color either. If we take a look over here back on w3schools.com, we can see that there's also a CSS tutorial on color. So you can use the names of colors, but then we can also take a look at the numerical values of colors. And those are pretty complicated, so we'll talk about that in the next video.